What if I told you that most of the live minnows you use are practically useless before they even hit the water? You spend good money on them. You put them in a fancy bucket with a bubbler. They look like they're swimming around just fine. But to a predator fish, they might as well be a chunk of wood. Today, we're talking about the silent killer of live bait effectiveness, temperature shock. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand the invisible mistake that's costing you bites, and more importantly, you'll know exactly how to fix it. The reason you're getting blanked might not be your spot, your line, or your luck. It's sitting right there in your bait bucket. So let me ask you, and be honest in the comments. When you buy minnows, do you just dump them in your bucket and go? Let's get into it. For generations, the process has been the same. You go to the bait shop, you get a scoop of minnows in a plastic bag, and you head to the lake. The first thing you do is dump that bag of bait into your bucket, maybe top it off with some water, turn on the aerator, and you're ready to fish. The common wisdom, the old school way of thinking, is that as long as the minnows are wiggling when you put them on the hook, they're good to go. We've all been taught to focus on just keeping them alive. But here's the critical distinction that most anglers miss. There is a huge, massive difference between a minnow that is merely surviving and a minnow that is thriving and effective as bait. The habits we've formed over the years are aimed at keeping them breathing, not keeping them in peak condition to trigger a strike. That simple oversight, that ingrained habit of dump and go, is the foundation of the problem we're going to solve today. So let's start with the basics. What is temperature shock really? It's not just about a minnow getting too hot or too cold. It's about the speed of that temperature change. Think of it like this. You can comfortably sit in a room that's 70 degrees, and you can also handle being in a 90-degree room if you have time to adjust. But if you were instantly teleported from the 70-degree room to the 90-degree one, your body would get a serious jolt. That's exactly what happens to a minnow, but on a much more extreme scale. Their entire biology is tied to the water around them. A rapid change in temperature sends their system into a state of panic. It's a massive physiological stressor that forces their body to burn incredible amounts of energy just to cope. It's not a minor inconvenience for them. It's a full-blown biological crisis that triggers a cascade of negative effects that, for our purposes as fishermen, ruins them as bait. We see a wiggling minnow, but we don't see the internal chaos. Now, let's talk about the first point of failure. It happens before you even leave the parking lot of the bait shop. This is the first shock. The water in those big tanks at the bait shop is almost always chilled and highly regulated. Let's say it's kept at a crisp 55 degrees to keep the bait healthy and reduce their metabolism. Meanwhile, your bait bucket has been sitting in the back of your truck on a summer morning. The water you filled it with, or just the bucket itself, could easily be 70 or 75 degrees. When you take that bag of minnows and just dump them in, they experience an instant temperature jump of 15 to 20 degrees. To a small, cold-blooded creature, this is like being thrown into a fire. We don't see it, but their heart rate and respiration go haywire. Stress hormones flood their tiny bodies. Right there, in that one simple, thoughtless action, you've started the process of ruining your bait. They've suffered a major trauma before their journey has even begun. But the abuse doesn't stop there. Now comes the second shock, which happens right when it's time to fish. You've been out on the water for a bit. The sun has been beating down on your bait bucket, even with the aerator running. The water inside has probably warmed up even more, maybe to 80 degrees. Now you reach in, grab one of those already stressed minnows, hook it, and cast it out. It lands in the lake, and just a few feet below the surface, the water temperature might be 65 degrees. Wham! Another massive instant temperature change, this time in the other direction. The minnow's body, which just spent the last hour desperately trying to adapt to warmer water, is now violently shocked by the cold. This double whammy is often what finishes the job. It can cause the minnow to become temporarily paralyzed or disoriented, making it look completely unnatural as it falls through the water column. It's no longer acting like prey, it's acting like a creature in systemic failure. This leads us to the most important consequence: how shock affects a minnow's movement. This is the absolute key to everything. A healthy, unstressed minnow swims in a way that is designed to attract predators, It's an energetic, darting, and often erratic movement. This motion, and the vibrations it sends through the water, is like a flashing neon sign that says easy meal to a nearby walleye, bass, or crappie. Now, consider the shocked minnow. It's completely drained of energy from dealing with physiological stress. So what does it do? It becomes lethargic. It might swim weakly in a straight line, or worse, just hang there from your hook, stunned and barely moving. It has lost that frantic escape motion that is the primary trigger for a predatory strike. It looks weak and sickly, and contrary to some beliefs, most predators are wired to prefer healthy prey. A predator is making an energy calculation. Is chasing and eating this thing worth the effort? A darting, panicked minnow signals a high-energy, nutritious meal. A floating, listless one signals something is wrong. Now, you might have an old-timer tell you something like, a little shock is good for 'em, toughens 'em up, makes 'em wiggle more. This is one of the most persistent and damaging myths in live bait fishing. Let's be perfectly clear. This is 100% wrong. It's like saying that running a marathon with the flu will make you a stronger runner. It makes absolutely no sense. Stress does not build short-term resilience in a bait fish. It depletes its finite energy reserves. The extra wiggling they might see is often a death spasm, not a sign of vigor. A shocked minnow is in energy conservation mode. Its only goal is survival, not broadcasting its presence to every predator in the area. That myth probably started because people saw the minnows survive the initial shock and assumed everything was fine. But again, we have to understand that mere survival is not the same as effectiveness. You're not trying to build a tough minnow, you're trying to present a tempting meal. The damage from temperature shock goes deeper than just movement. It's often invisible. Let's talk about the minnow's slime coat and its scent. Every fish has a natural slime coat that acts as a protective barrier against parasites and infection. This coat is also crucial for emitting a natural scent signature into the water. When a minnow is severely stressed, this slime coat can be damaged or begin to break down. Even worse, a stressed fish can release alarm pheromones into the water. Think of it as a chemical scream for help. Instead of your bait smelling like a normal, unsuspecting food source, it can actually smell like danger and panic. To a predator fish that relies heavily on its sense of smell, this is a major red flag. So, not only is your bait moving unnaturally, but it might also be sending out a scent signal that tells other fish to stay away. You're trying to ring the dinner bell, but instead, you're sounding the fire alarm. Okay, enough about the problem. Let's get to the solutions, and they are surprisingly simple. The absolute first step in prevention is acclimation. You've probably heard this term if you've ever kept an aquarium, and the principle is identical. You must equalize the temperatures between the transport water and the bucket water gradually. It is so easy. When you get your bag of minnows from the bait shop, do not just open it and dump it. Instead, just let the sealed bag float on the surface of the water in your bait bucket. Leave it there for at least 15 and preferably 20 minutes. This simple hands-off action allows the water temperature inside the bag to slowly rise or fall to match the temperature of the water in the bucket. It eliminates that first brutal shock. This single step costs you nothing but a tiny bit of patience and will fundamentally change the quality of your bait for the rest of the day. If you want to take your bait care to the next level, you can use what's known as the slow drip method for a perfect acclimation. This is what serious aquarium keepers and professional anglers do, especially with very sensitive or expensive bait. After you've floated the bag for about 20 minutes to equalize the temperature, you open the bag. Then, instead of dumping it, you slowly add small amounts of your bucket water into the bag every few minutes. Over the course of another 15 minutes, you'll gradually replace the bag water with your bucket water. An even better way is to use a piece of airline tubing, like from an aquarium pump, to set up a very slow siphon from your bucket into the minnows container. This not only matches the temperature perfectly, but it also gradually acclimates the fish to any differences in water chemistry, like pH or hardness. It sounds like a lot of work, but for a bucket of pricey emerald shiners, it's the ultimate insurance policy. Once your bait is properly acclimated to the bucket, your job still isn't done. You have to manage your bucket's temperature while you're on the water. A standard plastic bait bucket, especially if it's a dark color, is basically a solar oven when it's sitting on the deck of your boat. The sun will heat that water up incredibly fast. The easiest solution is the most obvious. Keep it in the shade whenever possible. Put it under a seat or in a storage compartment. Another great trick is to cover the bucket with a wet, light-colored towel. As the water evaporates from the towel, it creates a significant cooling effect, helping to keep the water temperature stable. Of course, the best solution is to invest in a quality insulated bait bucket. They work just like a cooler and are designed specifically to prevent these temperature swings. A simple white bucket is also a major improvement over a black or grey one, as it will absorb far less heat from the sun. Here is a pro-level tip that solves multiple problems at once. Use lake water. Instead of filling your bait bucket at home from the tap, wait until you get to the lake. The water from your tap has two big problems. First, it contains chlorine or chloramine, which is toxic to fish and will stress them out. Second, its temperature is a complete wildcard. By filling your bucket with water from the lake you're about to fish, you accomplish two things. You're using water that has the right chemistry and, most importantly, is already at the correct ambient temperature. This makes the second shock, the one that happens when you cast your minnow from the bucket into the lake, almost non-existent. The minnow is going from the lake water in your bucket to the very same lake water a few feet away. The transition is seamless. It's the ultimate way to ensure your bait is as comfortable and stress-free as possible when it matters most. It's also critical to understand the vicious cycle between temperature and oxygen. These two things are inseparable. The simple scientific fact is that warmer water holds less dissolved oxygen than colder water. Now think about what happens during temperature shock. When you dump your cold water minnows into a warmer bucket, their metabolism instantly speeds up. A faster metabolism means they require more oxygen to function. So you've created a perfect storm. The minnow's demand for oxygen has skyrocketed at the exact same moment the water's ability to supply that oxygen has plummeted. This is why you often see minnows in a warm bucket gasping at the surface, even with an aerator running full blast. The aerator is fighting a losing battle against physics. This reinforces why keeping the water cool is just as important, if not more important, than simply bubbling air into it. A cool bucket is an oxygen-rich bucket. So, how can you spot a shocked or stressed minnow with your own eyes? There are several visual cues you can learn to recognize. A healthy, happy minnow will be alert, its eyes will be clear, and its fins will typically be fanned out and relaxed. It will swim with purpose. A stressed-out minnow, on the other hand, will often have clamped fins, held tightly against its body. Its color might look faded or washed out. You might also notice its gills pumping much faster than normal as it struggles to get enough oxygen. And of course, the most obvious sign is lethargy. When you reach into the bucket, do you have to corner the minnow to catch it? That's a great sign of a healthy, vigorous bait. But if it just kind of rolls over and lets you pick it up with no resistance, it has essentially given up. It may be alive, but its will to live, and its effectiveness as bait, is long gone. Pay attention to these little details. It's also worth noting that not all bait fish are created equal when it comes to hardiness. Some species are far more sensitive to temperature shock than others. Delicate silvery baitfish like emerald shiners, small alewives, or threadfin shade are notoriously fragile. A sudden temperature change of even 5 to 10 degrees can be enough to kill them outright, let alone make them ineffective. This is why they are often the most expensive bait. They are difficult to keep. On the other end of the spectrum, you have tougher baits like fathead minnows, creek chubs, or certain types of suckers. They can tolerate a wider range of conditions and are more forgiving of mistakes. However, even these tough guys will be more effective if you treat them correctly. Just because they can survive the shock doesn't mean they aren't stressed. Knowing the sensitivity of the bait you're using should dictate how careful you need to be with your acclimation process. Let's debunk another common myth you might hear around the boat ramp. The idea that putting ice in your bait bucket will kill the minnows. This is one of those half-truths that leads people to do the wrong thing. The danger isn't the ice itself, it's how you use it. If you take a handful of ice cubes made from your chlorinated tap water and dump them directly into the bucket, you're going to cause problems. The chlorine will leach into the water and the ice will create intense cold spots, causing, you guessed it, more temperature shock. The correct way to use ice to cool your bait water is to use a sealed container. Simply freeze a standard plastic water bottle and float that in your bait bucket. The frozen bottle will cool the entire volume of water slowly and evenly, without ever touching the minnows or introducing any harmful chemicals from your tap water. This is the safest and most effective way to keep your bucket cool on a hot day. What if you're on a multi-day fishing trip? How do you keep bait healthy for the long haul? Just leaving them in a small bucket overnight, even with an aerator, is a recipe for disaster. For longer trips, you need a more stable system. A small to medium-sized cooler makes an excellent makeshift bait tank. The insulation will keep the temperature very stable. You'll need a good aerator, of course. The most important thing is water changes. At least once a day, you should carefully change out about 25 to 50% of the water with fresh, dechlorinated water that you've matched to the tank's temperature. Also, do not feed your bait. Without a proper biological filtration system, their waste will quickly break down into ammonia, which is highly toxic and will poison the water and kill them. They can easily go for several days without food, and starving them is far less harmful than letting them swim in their own filth. If none of the biological reasons have convinced you, let's talk about the financial argument. Let's be honest, live bait is not cheap anymore. Depending on where you are and what you're buying, you could easily spend $10, $20, or even $30 on a few dozen minnows for a single day of fishing. Now, if your current habit of shocking your bait is making even half of them ineffective, you are literally throwing half of your money away. You're paying for 100% of the bait, but only getting 50% of the performance. Taking 15 minutes at the start of your day to properly acclimate your bait is the single best return on investment you can make in your fishing. It costs you $0, only a little time and discipline. That small effort can be the difference between a full live well and going home with nothing but a lighter wallet. It's not just about catching more fish, it's about being a smarter, more efficient angler with your resources. Let's paint a picture to really drive this home. A case study. The tale of two fishermen. Imagine two boats, fishing the same weed edge, maybe 50 yards apart. Both guys bought their minnows from the same tank at the same bait shop just an hour ago. Fisherman A, we'll call him Bob, got to the spot, dumped his minnows straight into his bucket, and started fishing immediately. He puts his minnow down, and it just hangs there, looking sad. He gets a few half-hearted bites, maybe catches a small one. Fisherman B, let's call him Dave, took 20 minutes to float his bag and acclimate his bait. When he hooks his minnow, it's kicking and flashing, actively trying to escape. It looks alive and terrified. A perfect trigger. Dave is consistently pulling in nice fish, one after another. It's the same spot, the same bait, the same day. The only variable is that Dave took a few simple, crucial steps to care for his bait. This exact scenario plays out on thousands of lakes every single weekend. And while we've been focusing mostly on minnows, remember that this principle applies to all live bait. Everything from leeches and night crawlers to crayfish and shrimp are living creatures that are susceptible to temperature and water quality shock. A shocked leech won't perform that signature ribbon-like swimming motion that drives walleyes insane. It will just ball up. A shocked crayfish will sit motionless on the bottom instead of scurrying around and trying to hide, which is the action that draws in big bass. Even worms, if thrown from a cool foam container onto a sun-baked hook, can react negatively. Whatever bait you are using, if it's alive, it deserves the same level of care. The principles of gradual acclimation and maintaining a stable environment are universal. An active, healthy bait is always going to be more effective than one that is stressed and lethargic, regardless of its species. Finally, don't underestimate the psychological edge this gives you. There is a huge mental component to successful fishing. When you know, with 100% certainty, that you have done everything in your power to prepare your gear and your bait perfectly, you fish with a higher level of confidence. You're more patient because you trust your presentation. You're not constantly second-guessing if your bait is dead or if you should change it out. That quiet confidence allows you to focus better, to feel those subtle bites, and to stay in the zone longer. It eliminates a major variable from the equation, so you can concentrate on location and technique. Taking proper care of your bait isn't just a technical chore, it's a fundamental part of building a winning mindset on the water. You control the controllables, and this is one of the easiest things to control. So let's wrap all this advice into a final simple checklist. This should be your new non-negotiable routine for live bait fishing. Number 1, start with a quality, preferably insulated bait bucket, a white one at the very least. Number 2, whenever possible, fill that bucket with water from the lake you are fishing. Number 3, always, always, always acclimate your new bait by floating the sealed bag in your bucket for at least 15 to 20 minutes before releasing them. Number 4, on the water, keep your bucket cool and in the shade. Use a frozen water bottle on hot days to regulate the temperature. And number 5, if you're on a long trip, perform partial water changes daily. This isn't some secret advanced technique only for professional tournament anglers. This is the fundamental baseline for effective live bait fishing that everyone should be doing. Make this your unbreakable habit, and I absolutely guarantee you will see a positive difference in your catch rate. So, let's bring it all home. The big, critical takeaway today is this: it is not enough for your minnows to be just not dead. A shocked, stressed, and exhausted minnow is a useless minnow. The silent killer we've been talking about, the thing that's crippling your bait's effectiveness, isn't the hook, the predators, or the time spent in the bucket. It's the sudden, violent temperature changes we impose on them without a second thought. The real aha moment, the thing I hope you remember, is that the minnow that looks perfectly fine to your eyes might as well be a piece of plastic to a picky walleye or a big crappie. It has lost its life signal, that energetic movement and natural scent that triggers the attack. This changes everything because it shifts your entire mindset from just keeping bait alive to keeping it in prime condition. It's a small, simple change in your process that will lead to a massive change in your results. Thank you so much for watching. If this video just blew your mind or confirmed something you've suspected for years, do me a favor and hit that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more tips that challenge the old ways of fishing. Now, for the comments, I want to know, what's the biggest old school fishing tip you've always followed that you now realize is probably wrong? Let's get a good debate going down below.